So a story to start off with. A couple years back, I spent time in 12-step recovery. And one of the steps, step 2, is that you have a higher power, that you acknowledge a higher power, a power greater than yourself, that helps restore you to sanity. And when I was in those rooms, there was a gentleman that I met. He would share a story. And one time he talked about the fact that his higher power was Batman. And I was like, I was in my 20s. I was not really great at not judging people. I'm perfect now, just so you know. and I just thought that was hilarious. And I just, for days, would giggle about it. Like, Batman's your higher power. Well, as I came to know this man's story and his journey and his experience, Batman made sense to me. It made sense to me why, for him, something beyond him, something that was for him, and something to liberate him was Batman. And so today, I tell you that story because today I'm going to share with you something that's been really close to me, and I've kept it close, and I've kept it actually just something I do privately. And when Bradley brought up this series on mystery and the mystery of God, and he was talking about experience, and yes, we have the Bible, we have experience, and language is kind of limiting. This little voice in me was like, you should do it. You should do it. And I was like, no, I don't really want to talk about this. And no, you should do it. You should talk about the fact that when you pray, you often say she for God. And what that means to me, what that has opened up in me. And so I asked Bradley, he agreed, I don't know why. And as I was thinking about this, and researching it, there is so much on this topic. But me, in my fear of stepping forward and investigating, I thought this was just something I did to help me connect with God better. I found out there's like lots of scholarly and experience and people I know that do this as well. And so today is God is She 101. And I'm going to just touch on 2 things, just to maybe get your mind started. So let's dig in. The first that I want to read is from Genesis. I was raised as a Christian. Went to a nice Baptist church all my life. And the Bible became really boring to me in my 20s. And I was like, oh, I've heard it all. But recently, I've read and experienced things that have opened the Bible in ways that I could never imagine. So I'm going to read to you Genesis, and I'm going to give you, I love the Bible now. I really do. I don't think I'd ever say that a couple years ago, but I really love the Bible, and I really love this verse. So, in Genesis 1:26, and I'm going to read all the way to 28. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created man in his own image, and the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and every living creature that moves on the ground." So the context of Genesis, it is a beautiful poem. I know we've talked a little bit about Genesis 4 and the context of when it was written. So it was written during a time of exile. Israel was in Babylon, and they were able to put down on paper the story that they've been sharing with each other for years. I don't know how long. It doesn't say. But so the Babylonian creation story, which I had a chance to read, it's really great. is one of destruction, of revenge, of tearing apart, of chaos. It's one of, it's almost like Survivor. Like I thought about it and I was like, it's kind of like Survivor. Like there's lots of, like, going behind people's back. And it ends with Tiamat, who is the goddess of chaos, and she is torn apart, and from that we get land. So the Israelites would have known this story. It was like a story that was among them. They would have known it really well. So when they put down on paper Genesis, we have this story here that is a God of bringing together, a God of peace, of structure, of goodness, a God that speaks into what is chaotic and brings to it just beauty. And when they were also familiar in Babylon with goddesses and gods. And so in this Genesis account, we don't have God tearing apart. We have God restoring and putting together. Keep that in your head because it's important. Another big thing about Genesis is the repetition. So it's everywhere in the Hebrew Bible. There's repetition. It means something. So 3 times here we have God. It says that let us make man in our image, in our likeness, created them in his image. In the image of God, he created them. So many times over, doesn't just say, and God created mankind. Done. Many times over, there's a repetition there. So the first word here that we have is God created man in his own image. And the word image, okay, I'm really bad at saying Hebrew words, but I love Hebrew words. But the first word image is the word sahelam. And that is a male noun to mean the likeness of something. And the second word that we have here is in our likeness. So he says in our image, male noun. Guess what? In our likeness is a female noun, and it's demuth. And what you have here, and we would know this. We have English words. So we're like, okay, yeah. So image, likeness, great. Next. But when you start to understand and you start to study the Hebrew, you're like, oh my goodness, right here, right away, it says God in his likeness, male, or in his image, male, and his likeness, female, created them, created mankind. So God is both male and female in the fact that later on it says as well that he created, let us make them in our own image. Let us make male and female. When I read that, and I've read a lot of commentaries on it, another great thing about that Hebrew Bible and the tradition of Judaism is that they do a lot of midrash. They discuss it. They get dirty with the text. They argue it and with the arguing and the questioning and the digging into it, it just becomes richer and fuller. And when you read here that God created male and female, humankind, after her own image, it gives agency. For what it does for me in my experience as a female is it gives me agency. It gives me a place with God. Where before, when I thought of God only as male, I don't know what it's like to be male. I'm female. That's been my life experience. And so I would be like, okay, yeah, God is Father. Yeah, I have a great father. I have some great males in my life. I gave birth to 3 of them. So I know male from my interactions, but I don't know what it feels like to be male. But I know what it feels like to be female. And I know what it feels like to be mother. And when we give that weight, the same weight as male being created in God, as female being created in her, we give them a place, we give women a place at the table that for many years was not there. There's a writer that I like to read, and she has said many times that patriarchy is the backdrop of the Bible, not the design. And when you start to get into it, like really get into the text, you start to see that. The next thing that I, in my research, came across is in Psalm 145:8. The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and rich in love. You've probably heard that. It's been turned into a song. The word compassion in the Bible is used 13 times, and 13 times when associated with God. It has other uses too. And the word compassion in Hebrew is rakem. And rakem has a root word. So in Hebrew, we have them too. We have root words. So when you see a word, you know it's actually related to another word. And so the word for compassion is related to the root word of the word womb. So if you were an Israelite and you were to read, the Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and rich in love. You would look at that in Hebrew and you would actually hear, the Lord is gracious and womb-like, slow to anger, and rich in love. It's a really powerful image. God is womb. I don't know if I like to do research with things. So when I got pregnant with my first son, Brayden, I couldn't stop reading pregnancy books. And oh my goodness, the human body is magnificent. The female body, when pregnant, is the only body that grows an organ and then gets rid of it and then regrows the organ. That's the pancreas. Not the pancreas. That's the placenta. So, the womb is just this amazing organ that women have been gifted with. It protects a baby. It does things that we don't even, like, I never said to my body, okay, can you please take care of Oliver when he's in my body? Can you make sure that he has enough to eat, that he has enough space? Can you make sure that he has all the amniotic fluid that he needs to keep him safe in case I fall or in case I get bumped or hit? Your body, the female body just does that. One of the things I read is when anthropologists go and do studies on cave drawings, the image for the divine is the female image because it's just amazing. Like, oh my goodness, it's awesome. So let's think of that as God as womb. God protects us. She encloses us and makes sure that we have everything we need to survive and grow and be blessed. When I was pregnant with Oliver, this is Oliver, he would move, he would maybe turn over, and I would know, because I knew him so intimately, oh, he's about to go to sleep. Or Oliver was a big hiccuper, so I would feel like a little hiccup, and the next hour he's going to be hiccuping. I knew him in a way that words just couldn't express. God knows us. She knows us in ways that we can't even say because we are in her womb. Her compassion is over us. Throughout the Bible, there are times where God is spoken in the male language and given female attributes. There are also times in the Bible where God is talked about in a female context. I'm not going to go into all of them. There was a whole book I read. Bradley gave me a stack of books. My favorite book, get this, my favorite book was Sexism and God Talk. I'm still reading it. It's really good. But it just points out in the Old Testament and the New Testament different times that we've just glossed over, read through, and been like, okay, yeah. Like a baby at a mother's breast. Yeah, but when you get into that phrase or that story, what that meant, it wasn't just a male protecting. It was talking about God in female language protecting her creation. The other thing, I just wanted to end with the two things that when I talk about God as she, for me, what is done for me. One I already touched on, so I won't give too much, but I just want to tell a story. So the first one is that I feel like I have a place. I feel that when we say sometimes, oh, God is for the marginalized, God is for the oppressed, I feel like my experience has been, yeah, but a white man is saying that. When I hear God as she, and I read the powerful image of a compassionate womb-like God holding me in, I go, yeah. As a mother, I would fight for my kids. So it gives me a place, it grounds me in God. The other thing it does, I want to tell a story. So it grounds me in God. It has also shown me that I'm not alone in that. I spent time in February with 100 amazing women. One of them is here today. And one of our friends got up and she said, yeah, so at night, I put my kids to bed and I sing hymns to them. We're like, everyone's like, oh, great. But when I sing those hymns, I actually change the male pronouns to female pronouns. And the room was just like alive after that. People were just, it was just beautiful. And I felt alive. When somebody else speaks that truth, and maybe that's something that you've been working through, it does something. And we ended that amazing few days together singing, She's Got the Whole World in Her Hands. 100 women coming together, feeling alive, that we were not the only ones to say that our God understands what it's like to be a female, because our God is also female. The other thing was, now that I've been researching and talking more about it, I've found other communities of women around. So I spent some time with a group of women, and we were doing some meditation and contemplation. And so we were sitting in the garden, and we were asked to think about what God as womb does for us. What does it stir up? So I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I just had this thought, like, oh my goodness. When I look at God as female in the stories that I've been told and taught and read through the Bible, those stories, they change for me in a really empowering, beautiful way. For example, when Bradley told us about Elijah in the cave, and that there was earthquakes and that wasn't God, and there was all this chaos and big thundery things, then God wasn't in those. But in the silence in the cave, in the whisper, God was there. When you read that story, and if you were to say, she was there, what does that do for you? For me, it brings a picture of sitting in my mother's lap. Maybe I've scraped my knee. Maybe my sister stole something from me. Maybe something happened that I needed comfort. And I'm sitting there in my mom's lap. And my mom is stroking my hair, and she's whispering to me. And it brings me back to a place of security and warmth and total belonging. When I was sitting in that garden. The story that really, I was just overwhelmed. I didn't even have words. I was overwhelmed with the retelling of Eden, Garden of Eden, and God walking in the garden with Adam and Eve. And it reminded me of my grandparents, my grandma and grandpa on my dad's side. They had this garden in their backyard. And we would spend a week every summer. My parents would drop us off, and we would spend a week with my grandma and grandpa. And my grandpa would take us out and my grandma to the garden. And my grandpa would be like, oh, over there, I need to cut down that tree to let more light in for the garden. And over here, we've got this growing. And he would stand and tell us all the cool things about the garden. But my grandmother would bend down close to the soil, and she would show us the little bugs that were growing. She would show us how she would left the milkweeds over there for the monarch butterflies, because they need to eat too. And my grandmother would be on the ground, and she'd point out those little details that just made as wildcrats say, the animal links. She would just show us the picture of how the ecosystem, how the world works together. So when we think of God walking through the garden, I think of God Mother walking through, maybe even holding Adam and Eve's hand, saying, oh, just stop. Look what I did. Look at this. Let's get down really close and let's look at this beautiful thing that I've created. And if we go through stories like that and we open ourselves up to the idea of Mother God being in those moments, it makes it just so rich and meaningful.